There is a reason your soulmate suddenly became cold when their heart had once been completely open to you. There is a reason conversations changed, promises were questioned, and a future that once felt certain was suddenly treated like a mistake. And now, after all this time, the person who planted those doubts has finally been exposed. But what has just been discovered is far more painful than anyone expected. Because that person was never working alone. Listen carefully. Because what your soulmate has learned is forcing them to reconsider every decision they made when they walked away from you. For a long time, they believed they had made that choice themselves. They believed leaving you was painful but necessary. They convinced themselves that the warnings they were hearing were coming from someone who genuinely cared about their future. What they did not understand was that those warnings had been carefully designed to make them afraid of losing everything if they stayed with you. It started slowly. Someone close to your soulmate began asking questions that sounded harmless. Are you sure this relationship is right for you? What if you regret choosing this person later? Why are you sacrificing so much for someone who may eventually leave? The questions were never aggressive enough to look suspicious. They were repeated quietly, patiently, until your soulmate began hearing those same fears inside their own mind. The person behind it knew exactly what they were doing. They were not trying to destroy your love in one dramatic moment. They were trying to make your soulmate destroy it themselves. And that is what made the betrayal so effective. Your soulmate trusted this person. They shared private conversations with them. They admitted their fears. They talked about the future they imagined with you. They even revealed the things they loved most about you. Every confession became information that could later be twisted against the relationship. Every vulnerable moment became another opportunity to create doubt. Whenever your soulmate defended you, this person found another reason to question you. Whenever your soulmate said, "But I know their heart," they were told that love could make people blind. Whenever your soulmate said they wanted to fight for the relationship, they were warned that staying with you could destroy their relationship with their family, damage their reputation, or cost them opportunities they had worked years to build. Eventually, your soulmate reached a breaking point. They walked away from you carrying a version of the truth that had been manufactured for them. And you were left wondering how someone who once spoke about forever could suddenly behave as though everything between you meant nothing. But something recently happened that reopened the entire story. During a private conversation, someone accidentally mentioned a detail they were never supposed to know. Your soulmate noticed immediately. It was information that had only been shared between you and them. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Your soulmate asked one simple question. How do you know that? The answer never came. Instead, the person tried to change the subject. That silence was enough. Your soulmate began looking backward at everything that happened before your separation. Old conversations suddenly felt different. Certain warnings sounded rehearsed. Certain accusations had appeared at strangely convenient moments. Even the timing of the breakup began to feel suspicious. So your soulmate started asking questions. And eventually, one person finally admitted the truth. Yes. Someone had deliberately convinced your soulmate to leave you. They had exaggerated situations. They had repeated private information out of context. They had created fears that were never based on reality. And they had even told your soulmate that you were preparing to move on with someone else, hoping that jealousy and pride would finish what manipulation had started. Your soulmate was devastated. But that was not the worst part. Because when they demanded to know why this person had gone so far to separate you, the confession took an unexpected turn. The person admitted that they had been pressured. Someone else had wanted your relationship destroyed. Someone far closer to your soulmate than anyone imagined. Your soulmate asked for a name. At first, the person refused. Then your soulmate stood up and said, "I destroyed something real because I trusted you. You are going to tell me everything." That was when the room changed. The person finally whispered the name. And your soulmate stopped moving. Because the person secretly behind everything was someone who had smiled at you, welcomed you, acted supportive of the relationship, and watched quietly while your soulmate walked away. Someone your soulmate had defended countless times. Someone they believed would never betray them. But the confession did not end there. Your soulmate was told there had been conversations happening behind their back for months. Decisions had been discussed before your soulmate even knew there was a problem. Someone had decided that you did not belong in the future they had imagined for your soulmate, and instead of confronting you openly, they created a plan to make the relationship collapse from the inside. Your soulmate felt sick hearing it. Because suddenly they remembered one particular night. The night everything between you changed. The argument. The accusations. The decision to walk away. And now they realize something terrifying. Almost every fear they threw at you that night had been planted in their mind by somebody else. The words were coming from your soulmate. But the betrayal had been written by someone behind the scenes. Your soulmate has been carrying enormous regret since discovering this. Not simply because they left you, but because they now understand what you were trying to tell them when you begged them not to believe everything they were hearing. You knew something was wrong. You could feel another influence inside the relationship. But every time you tried to explain it, your soulmate thought you were being defensive. Now they understand. And there is one memory they cannot escape. Your face when they chose to believe someone else instead of you. They remember the silence after the final argument. They remember how you stopped trying to defend yourself. They remember the moment you realized that nothing you said was going to change their mind. And your soulmate now knows that the person they abandoned was possibly the only person in that entire situation who had been telling them the truth. But do not skip what happened next, because the exposure created an even bigger confrontation. Your soulmate went directly to the person whose name had been revealed. They did not call first. They did not send a message. They wanted to look them in the eyes. The moment your soulmate mentioned your name, the person immediately became defensive. That reaction confirmed almost everything. Your soulmate asked, "Why did you want me to leave them?" The person gave excuses. They said they were only trying to protect your soulmate. They claimed they had seen things your soulmate could not see. They insisted that eventually your soulmate would understand. But your soulmate was no longer willing to accept vague explanations. Then they placed one piece of evidence on the table. And the excuses stopped. Because your soulmate had discovered something that proved the betrayal had begun much earlier than anyone had admitted. There were messages. Not one. Not two. A chain of private conversations discussing how to make your soulmate doubt you. How to create distance. How to make your relationship feel impossible. And then your soulmate saw one message that changed everything. It was sent on a day when you and your soulmate had been happier than you had been in months. The message said that if your relationship was allowed to continue much longer, your soulmate might choose you permanently. Those words broke something inside them. Because suddenly the truth became painfully clear. They were never protecting your soulmate from you. They were afraid your soulmate would build a life with you that they could no longer control. Your soulmate had not been warned because you were dangerous. They had been manipulated because your love was becoming serious. But then another message appeared. One that made your soulmate stare at the screen in complete disbelief. Because it mentioned a secret arrangement. A promise that had been made if your soulmate could be convinced to leave you. And when your soulmate demanded to know what that promise was, the person finally admitted something so disturbing that even the original betrayal suddenly seemed small. Because someone had actually benefited from your separation. And the name connected to that benefit was the last name your soulmate ever expected to hear. The name connected to that secret arrangement was not a stranger. It was not an ex who simply wanted another chance. It was not someone who had openly hated your relationship from the beginning. That would have been easier to understand. The person connected to the benefit was someone your soulmate had trusted with major decisions for years, someone who had always claimed they wanted nothing except happiness for them. And when your soulmate saw that name beside the arrangement, they read it again and again because their mind refused to accept what their eyes were showing them. Suddenly, this was no longer just a story about someone convincing your soulmate to leave you. This was about people around them treating your love like an obstacle that needed to be removed. Your soulmate demanded the entire truth, and this time they refused to leave the room until every detail was explained. The person sitting across from them finally admitted that before the separation, there had been repeated private conversations about your soulmate's future. Money, family expectations, reputation, and another possible relationship had all been discussed. The people involved believed that if your soulmate stayed with you, they would eventually stop allowing others to control the direction of their life. That was what frightened them. You represented a future your soulmate might choose for themselves. And apparently, somebody could not allow that to happen. Your soulmate's hands began shaking as more details came out. They remembered all those moments when someone had told them they were changing because of you. They remembered being accused of forgetting their family because they spent more time talking to you. They remembered being told that choosing you would mean turning their back on everyone who had sacrificed for them. At the time, those words created guilt. Now your soulmate understood that guilt had been used like a weapon. The strangest part was that you had never asked your soulmate to abandon anyone. You had never demanded that they choose between you and their family. You had only wanted honesty. You wanted your relationship protected from outside interference. But somehow, even that had been twisted into evidence that you were controlling. Your soulmate covered their face when they realized how badly they had misunderstood you. They remembered one argument where you said, "I feel like I am fighting people I cannot even see." At the time, your soulmate became angry. Now those words were haunting them. Because you had been right. There were people behind the scenes discussing your relationship while pretending nothing was happening. Then your soulmate asked the question nobody in that room wanted to answer. What exactly did they receive when I left? Silence. Your soulmate asked again. This time louder. What did they get because I walked away from the person I loved? The confession came slowly. There had been an agreement involving money and a future opportunity. Someone had promised support, access, or financial help if your soulmate could be pushed toward a different path. Your soulmate was never supposed to know. They were supposed to believe the breakup happened naturally. They were supposed to move forward, eventually meet someone considered more acceptable, and never look backward long enough to question who had benefited from losing you. But your soulmate did look backward. And now everything was collapsing. They stood up and walked toward the door, but before leaving they turned around and asked one final question. Did they ever know I still loved this person? Nobody answered. Your soulmate stared at them. Did they know? Finally, someone whispered, yes. That answer hurt worse than everything else. Because this meant the people responsible had known your soulmate was still emotionally attached to you. They knew the breakup was destroying them. They saw the sleepless nights. They saw your soulmate checking their phone hoping your name might appear. They watched them become quieter after the separation. And they still continued pretending that leaving you had been the right decision. Your soulmate walked outside feeling as though years of their life had just been rewritten in a few minutes. The anger was enormous, but underneath that anger was something even stronger, grief. They were grieving the version of your love story that could have existed if they had trusted their own heart instead of everyone else's opinions. For the first time, your soulmate admitted something they had been avoiding for a long time. They never truly stopped loving you. They only learned how to hide it. They learned how to stay busy enough not to think about you. They learned how to smile when people asked whether they had moved on. They learned how to pretend your name no longer had power over them. But every once in a while, something would bring the memories back. A place. A song. A familiar phrase. A particular hour of the night when the world became quiet enough for the truth to return. And the truth was always the same. They missed you. Now that missing feeling had been joined by regret. Your soulmate returned home that night and opened something they had kept hidden for a long time. It was connected to you. Something they had claimed they no longer cared about but had never been able to throw away. They held it in their hands while remembering the version of themselves who once believed your connection could survive anything. Then they whispered, "I should have protected us." Nobody heard those words. But they meant them. The following morning, your soulmate began contacting people who had been around during the final weeks of your relationship. They were no longer searching for reassurance. They were searching for facts. One person admitted that they had always suspected something was wrong. Another said they remembered hearing conversations about getting you out of the picture. Someone else revealed that your soulmate had been deliberately given false information about you immediately before one of your biggest arguments. Each answer added another piece. And every piece pointed toward the same conclusion. Your separation had not been one person's spontaneous interference. It had been coordinated. Different people had played different roles. One created doubt. One passed information. One exaggerated your mistakes. One kept your soulmate emotionally overwhelmed. And someone at the center made sure your soulmate never had enough peace to think clearly. But there was still one unanswered question. Why had they been so desperate? Why did your relationship matter enough for multiple people to interfere? Your soulmate finally found the answer inside an old conversation they had almost deleted years ago. There was a message from someone involved in the betrayal saying, "If those two stay together, eventually the truth will come out." Your soulmate froze. What truth? Until that moment, they had believed people interfered because they disapproved of you. Now it looked different. Maybe they were not only trying to separate you. Maybe they were trying to keep something hidden. Your soulmate immediately began digging deeper. They searched through old messages, dates, conversations, and family events. They compared things you had once told them with explanations other people had given. And then one memory suddenly returned with terrifying clarity. Before your separation, you had once asked about something strange you noticed inside their family. At the time, your soulmate dismissed it. Someone had quickly changed the subject. Another person became unusually defensive. And within days, the pressure on your relationship became much stronger. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat change when they connected those events. You had accidentally come too close to something. That was when they decided you needed to go. Not because you had done something terrible, but because you might eventually discover something they had spent years trying to hide. Your soulmate contacted the person who had first exposed the manipulation and demanded another meeting. This time there would be no half-confessions. When they arrived, your soulmate placed the old message on the table. If those two stay together, eventually the truth will come out. Then they asked, "What truth?" The person went pale. Your soulmate knew immediately that they had found the real reason. Tell me." The person shook their head. "Your soulmate did not move. You already helped destroy my relationship. You do not get to protect them anymore." For several long seconds, there was only silence. Then the person finally began speaking. They said what happened before your separation went back much further than your soulmate realized. It involved a decision made years earlier, a promise inside the family, and information connected directly to your soulmate's future. Someone had been terrified that if you stayed close, you would eventually encourage your soulmate to question things they had been taught never to question. Your soulmate asked, "What does any of that have to do with them?" The answer came quietly. "More than you know." Then a document was mentioned. An old document. One your soulmate had never seen. A document containing a name your soulmate recognized immediately. Your name. Your soulmate stopped breathing for a second. How can their name be in a document that existed before we separated? The person looked away. And that was the moment your soulmate understood that the betrayal had started long before the breakup. Long before the arguments. Possibly even before anyone admitted they were against your relationship. Your soulmate demanded to see that document. At first, the person refused. Then your soulmate said something that ended the argument. "If my name and their name are connected to this, I have the right to know what you people have been hiding." The person finally opened a locked drawer. Inside was a folder. Your soulmate recognized the handwriting on the front. It belonged to someone they trusted completely. Their hands trembled as the folder was placed in front of them. Your soulmate opened it. The first page contained ordinary information. The second page contained dates. The third page changed everything. Because beside your name was a handwritten sentence. Your soulmate read it once. Then again. Their eyes filled with tears. And when they looked up, the only words they could manage were, "You knew this whole time?" The person across the table did not deny it. And what was written beside your name revealed that someone had known from the beginning exactly what you meant to your soulmate. And they had made a promise to make sure the two of you never reached the future you were supposed to have. Your soulmate kept staring at that handwritten sentence beside your name, almost hoping they had misunderstood it. But there was no misunderstanding. The words were clear. Someone had written that if your connection ever became serious enough to lead to a permanent future, certain plans inside the family would have to change. And beneath that sentence was another note, shorter, colder, and even more disturbing. "Do not let this relationship reach marriage." Your soulmate felt something inside them collapse. This was not concern. This was not protection. This was a decision. A decision made about your love story without either of you being present. They slowly lifted their eyes from the document and asked, "Who wrote this?" The person sitting across from them hesitated. Your soulmate already recognized the handwriting, but part of them still wanted to hear the truth spoken aloud. Finally, the name was confirmed. And that confirmation hurt in a way your soulmate had not prepared for. Because this was someone they had trusted with some of the most important moments of their life. Someone who had looked them in the eyes and encouraged them to follow their heart while secretly making sure that heart never led back to you. Your soulmate turned another page. There were dates, phone numbers, short notes about conversations. Your name appeared again, then again, and again. Some notes described arguments that later happened almost exactly as written. Your soulmate suddenly realized that certain conflicts between you had not simply happened naturally. Someone had predicted them because someone had helped create them. One note mentioned a specific insecurity your soulmate had once shared privately. Another said that this insecurity could be used to make them question whether you truly wanted a future. Your soulmate's face changed when they read it. Because they remembered exactly when that fear had been used. It had happened during one of the final weeks before your separation. Someone had told your soulmate that you were probably keeping your options open. There had been no proof. But your soulmate was already emotionally exhausted, and the accusation landed at exactly the right moment. They confronted you. You denied it. You tried to explain. But they had already been prepared not to believe you. Now your soulmate understood why. The argument had been planted before it ever began. They closed their eyes as the memory returned. You asking them, "Why are you suddenly treating me like an enemy?" Your soulmate had no answer then. Now they did. Because somebody had spent weeks teaching them to see danger where there had once been love. Your soulmate turned to the person across the table and said, "You all watched me blame them for things they never did." The person tried to explain that not everyone knew how far it had gone. Your soulmate cut them off. You knew enough. Their voice was shaking now. You knew I loved them. You knew they loved me. And you still let me believe they were the problem. No answer came. That silence said more than any apology could. Your soulmate picked up the folder and stood. But before leaving, they noticed something tucked inside the back cover. A sealed envelope. It had never been opened. On the front was your soulmate's name. Underneath, written in smaller letters, were 3 words. If they return. Your soulmate stared at it. Who wrote this? This time the answer came quickly. The person who had been at the center of the betrayal. Your soulmate opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated shortly after your separation. The first few lines were not an apology. They were instructions. Instructions about what to say if your soulmate ever started asking questions. Instructions about how to make them believe that leaving you had saved them from a terrible future. Instructions about which memories to remind them of whenever they began missing you. Your soulmate's hands tightened around the page. Every line proved that someone had expected their feelings for you to survive. They knew your soulmate would eventually question the breakup. They knew your soulmate might try to come back. And they had prepared another layer of manipulation in advance. Then your soulmate reached the middle of the letter. That was where everything changed. There was a sentence that read, "If they ever learn why we truly needed this relationship to end, we will lose more than control." Your soulmate read it again. Lose what? What could possibly be more important than destroying two people who loved each other? They kept reading. The next paragraph referred to a financial decision connected to your soulmate's future. Then it mentioned a legal agreement. Then one specific date. Your soulmate recognized the date immediately. It was the exact week they had once seriously discussed marrying you. Suddenly, the timing made sense. That was when the pressure had become unbearable. That was when family arguments increased. That was when rumors about you appeared. That was when someone suddenly claimed you had said something disrespectful that you never said. That was when your soulmate was warned they would lose everything if they chose you. At the time, they thought people were speaking emotionally. Now they realized those words may have been literal. There had been something at stake. Something connected to money, property, inheritance, or control. And your marriage could have changed it. Your soulmate took the folder home and spent hours going through every page. They barely slept. Every time they thought they had reached the bottom of the betrayal, another detail appeared. Then they found a photocopy of an old agreement. Several names were listed. Your soulmate recognized almost all of them. But one signature was missing. There was a handwritten note beside the empty line. Cannot proceed if marriage choice changes. Your soulmate felt their stomach drop. Marriage choice. Your soulmate whispered your name. Because suddenly this was no longer about people simply disliking you, their choice of partner had been connected to something larger. Someone's financial future depended on your soulmate making a different choice. And if your soulmate married you, that arrangement could collapse. The realization made them furious. They had spent years believing they had destroyed the relationship because they had been confused, frightened, or not ready. Now they were discovering that people around them had benefited from that confusion. People had gained something from your absence. And you had paid the emotional price. Your soulmate began making calls. One person refused to speak. Another hung up immediately after hearing your name. A third person finally said, "You need to stop digging." That sentence only made your soulmate more determined. Why? The person hesitated, because some things were done to protect the family. Your soulmate replied, "You did not protect the family. You destroyed my future." Then they asked one question. Was money involved? Silence, that was enough. Your soulmate continued. Was there an agreement tied to who I married? Another silence. Then came a quiet answer. Yes. Your soulmate closed their eyes. For a moment, they could not speak. Then they asked, "Did they know I wanted to marry you?" The person said, "Yes." Did they know we were serious? Yes. Did they know separating us would destroy both of us? A longer pause. Then. Yes. Your soulmate ended the call. They did not cry immediately. They simply sat in silence. Because there are moments when betrayal becomes too large for tears. This was one of them. They began remembering every person who had comforted them after the breakup. Some of those same people had told them it was for the best. Now your soulmate wondered how many of them knew the truth. How many had watched your soulmate suffer while secretly knowing the separation had been engineered? How many had watched you disappear from their life and felt relieved? That thought was unbearable. But then your soulmate remembered something else. You had once told them that one day the truth would become too heavy to stay hidden. At the time, they thought you were speaking emotionally. Now those words felt almost prophetic. Because the truth was moving fast. And people who had stayed silent for years were starting to panic. Your soulmate received an unexpected message later that evening. It came from someone who had not spoken to them in a long time. The message contained only one sentence. You still do not know the worst part. Your soulmate called immediately. No answer. They called again. Nothing. Then another message arrived. Meet me alone tomorrow. Your soulmate barely slept that night. By morning, they were already on their way. The meeting happened in a quiet place away from everyone connected to the family. The person looked nervous from the moment your soulmate arrived. They said, "Before I tell you anything, you need to understand that I was told never to speak about this." Your soulmate replied, "I have already lost enough because people stayed silent." The person nodded. Then they placed an old phone on the table. This belonged to someone involved. Your soulmate stared at it. What is on it? Messages. Your soulmate's heart started pounding. About them? The person looked directly at your soulmate. About both of you. The phone was unlocked. A conversation appeared. The messages went back to the time before your relationship had fallen apart. At first, they discussed ordinary things. Then your name appeared. Your soulmate scrolled slowly. Someone had written, "They are getting too close." Another response said, "Then create enough pressure that one of them gives up." Your soulmate's jaw tightened. They kept reading. There were discussions about timing. About who should speak to your soulmate. About which fears would work best. Then a message appeared that made your soulmate stop. Do not contact you directly. If you realizes what is happening, everything could come out. Your soulmate looked up. What did they think you knew? The person sitting across from them swallowed hard. That is what I came to tell you. Your soulmate leaned forward. The person continued. You had seen something you were never supposed to see. Your soulmate froze. What? A document. Your soulmate's face changed. What document? The person explained that long before the breakup, you had accidentally been shown or come across information connected to the family arrangement. You may not have understood what it meant at the time, but someone became terrified that eventually you would ask the right questions. So they decided the safest solution was not to confront you. It was to remove you from your soulmate's life before you understood what you had found. Your soulmate whispered, "So this was never only about keeping us apart." No. They were afraid of what you might discover? Yes. Your soulmate looked back at the phone. Then they noticed one final message in the conversation. It had been sent just days before your separation. Once they are apart, retrieve what you has. Your soulmate stared at those words. Retrieve what you had? They looked up sharply. What were they trying to get back from you? The person's expression changed. For the first time during the entire meeting, they looked genuinely afraid. Then they said something your soulmate never expected. They never got it back. Your soulmate stopped breathing. What do you mean? The person leaned closer. Whatever you found. They believe you still has it. And that was when your soulmate realized the people who destroyed your relationship may still be watching from a distance, waiting to discover whether the one piece of evidence they feared most is still in your possession. But your soulmate was about to learn something even more shocking. Because someone had recently gone looking for that evidence again. And this time, they had used your soulmate's name to get close to you. The moment your soulmate learned that someone had recently used their name to get close to you, everything changed. Until then, they had been angry about the past. Now they realized the betrayal might still be happening in the present. Someone was still afraid of what you knew. Someone was still trying to control the story. And suddenly, your soulmate had only one thought in their mind: they needed to reach you before another lie did. They called the person who had revealed the old messages and demanded every detail. Who approached you? What did they say? What were they looking for? The answer made your soulmate furious. Someone connected to the original betrayal had apparently tried to present themselves as a messenger, claiming your soulmate wanted certain old belongings returned. But your soulmate had never sent them. They had never asked anyone to contact you. Their name had been used without permission. That was the moment your soulmate understood something important. The people who separated you once were willing to do it again. But this time, your soulmate was not going to remain silent. They sent one message directly to you. Not through family. Not through a friend. Not through another person carrying somebody else's version of the truth. Directly to you, the message was simple. If anyone has contacted you using my name, please do not believe them. It was not me. There are things I finally know, and I owe you the truth. Your soulmate stared at the message before pressing send. Their hands were shaking. Because sending it meant admitting something they had avoided for years. You had been right. You had not destroyed the relationship. You had not imagined the manipulation. You had not been the problem everyone tried to make you become. And your soulmate had trusted the wrong people. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Your soulmate kept looking at their phone, wondering whether they had waited too long. They understood that you owed them nothing. You did not owe them an immediate answer. You did not owe them forgiveness. You did not owe them another chance simply because the truth had finally reached them. For once, your soulmate was not thinking about what they wanted from you. They were thinking about what they had taken from you. Your peace. Your trust. Your confidence in the relationship. The future you once believed you were building together. And that realization hurt more than losing you ever had. Later that evening, your soulmate opened the old folder again. But this time they were not looking for another secret. They were looking at your name. The same name people had tried so hard to erase from their future. And your soulmate whispered, "They were afraid of us because they knew I would choose you." That sentence finally made everything clear. The betrayal was never proof that your connection had been weak. It happened because certain people believed your connection was becoming strong enough to change your soulmate's life. Strong enough to make them question old expectations. Strong enough to make them choose their own future. Strong enough to make manipulation stop working. That was why fear had been created. That was why lies had been planted. That was why your love story had been attacked from inside instead of challenged openly. But something had changed now. Your soulmate was no longer protecting the people who betrayed them. They began confronting everyone involved. One by one. They made it clear that nobody was allowed to speak for them again. Nobody was allowed to use your name as a weapon. Nobody was allowed to rewrite what happened between you. And nobody was going to convince them that uncovering the truth was somehow disrespectful to the family. The person who originally convinced your soulmate to leave you finally tried to apologize. They said things had gone further than they intended. Your soulmate looked at them and replied, "You knew I loved that person, and you still taught me to doubt them. You do not get to call that a mistake." Then came the question that silenced the room. "If you had done to me what you did to you, would you have told me to forgive them?" Nobody answered. Your soulmate walked away. Not because every wound had suddenly healed. Not because everything could be fixed overnight. But because for the first time, they were walking away from the people who created the confusion instead of walking away from the person they loved. And then your soulmate looked at their phone again. There was finally a response from you. It was not long. It did not promise reconciliation. It did not erase the past. But it was enough to make your soulmate sit down and cover their face. Because after everything that happened, you had answered. Your soulmate read your words again and again. Then they began crying. Not because they believed everything was automatically going back to the way it was. But because a door they thought they had permanently destroyed was not completely closed. And this time, your soulmate knows something they did not understand before. If they ever get another opportunity to stand beside you, they cannot bring the same fear, the same silence, or the same weakness that destroyed the relationship before. They will have to bring truth. They will have to bring accountability. They will have to protect the relationship when outside voices become loud. And most importantly, they will have to prove through their actions that your heart will never again be sacrificed just to keep other people comfortable. Because the biggest betrayal was never simply that someone convinced your soulmate to leave. The biggest betrayal was that people who claimed to love your soulmate watched them lose you while knowing the reasons were built on manipulation. Now that truth has finally been exposed. The masks are falling. The excuses are disappearing. And your soulmate can no longer pretend they do not know what happened. Whether your story begins again or whether you choose a different future, one thing has permanently changed. You are no longer carrying the blame for a betrayal you did not create. And your soulmate finally knows exactly who they should have trusted from the beginning. You.